Hello everybody, welcome to Books Up Close. My name's Chris Lloyd. This is my recap of what I read in February. I know it's late, don't come for me. Time is flying by. But here are the things that I read in February. And I'm going to start with the ones I didn't love so much and then move to the ones that I did like so that we end on a positive note. Before that, a reminder, please like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already and ring the bell for notifications. Share it with someone that you know that likes books. It was really helpful and means more people get to see these. And as ever, comment below what you read in February, what you want to read next month. My cat is probably gonna be involved in this video because I've changed location and sat on the floor and he likes to be involved. Okay, well, he's just climbed on the bed, so let's hope he doesn't disturb things too much. Okay, so I'm going to start with the book I did not like this month, which was The Great Believers by Rebecca Mackay, and it's a chunky little book. I read it for a book club that I sometimes go to that met again online in February, so I was able to join them because usually they're in person. And I've been wanting to read this book for a really, really long time. It sounds right up my street, but I found it so dull, actually, and I'm sorry to say that, but I just couldn't get on with it at all. It's a good 500 odd pages, so it's a real investment of time, and I just felt like it didn't do the things I wanted it to do. It didn't deliver on its promises, if you like. It's about a group of people in the 80s in Chicago kind of dealing with the AIDS epidemic, and that's then interspliced with some scenes in 2015 Paris. And the Paris scene's like fine, but they didn't really add much to me. The focus was also on like this kind of web of individuals, but I never fully felt connected to any of them. The central character of Yale, who we find out about him through this third person voice, so we're never kind of fully in his mind, but he kind of just moves through the world unaware, and I kind of expected some of the things to happen, but some of the other things didn't seem, not that they weren't believable, but there was no kind of build up to them. It just felt kind of cheap in a way. I don't know. I didn't feel the emotional richness I wanted. Way too much of the book is spent talking about these paintings that this old woman has got in her attic, and the gallery in Chicago is trying to buy them or trying to obtain them, and the family don't want the woman to sell them. And I don't understand what it's got to do with anything. It felt very laboured. So yeah, I don't know. This book wasn't for me. Other people loved it. The book club liked it generally. I did not. So I'm not sure I'm going to read another Mackay book. If you like this book, I'm sorry. Tell me why you loved it in the comments. Maybe I'm missing something. I'm very willing to acknowledge that. So yeah, that was The Great Believers, which took a while to read and didn't love. The other book that I didn't love that I was way more surprised by is Greek Lessons by Han Kang. Again, don't come for me below. This book is the kind of thing I would usually love. It's short, it's concise, it's elliptical, it's strange, all of the stuff I love. And I love The Vegetarian by Kang. I think it's a perfect book. This one is about a woman who has lost the ability to speak, or is not speaking, hard to tell. And her teacher, who is teaching her Greek, he is slowly losing his eyesight, and they basically kind of come together through this class and they kind of find out about each other. And it's told in these kind of alternating chapters about each of them. I didn't feel involved in this story. I didn't feel an emotional connection with anyone in the story. I didn't entirely know where we were going most of the time. It felt maybe too elliptical. There were too many gaps, too many things that I wanted to know about. And the ending just kind of drifted. Yeah, I really wasn't gripped by this at all. It was hard to get through, and it's only, it's under 150 pages. So that was a real struggle to push through this book, and I really wanted to love it. So I might go back to it in a couple of months, maybe, see if I was just in a bad mood or something as I read it, which is possible, right? And we'll see what comes of that. So yeah, not my favourite. But if you want to read Han Kang, go read The Vegetarian. It's like the best thing. Okay, we're going to move on to my more middling books that I'm in between about. So the first is Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. Now, I read her other book, Another Brooklyn, last year, and that I loved. Brilliant, short, concise, snappy, really evocative, really beautiful prose. I drifted into it and didn't put it down for the afternoon that I read it. This story I was less gripped by, I was less immersed in. Again, it's written in the style that Woodson does, of kind of lots of gaps between the paragraphs. lots of space for you, the reader, to kind of like put stuff in, which I love. It is following this family in Brooklyn in the early 2000s, but it's also illuminating their past, as it says on the back, like from the Tulsa massacre up to like 9/11. And it's kind of trying to do this sweeping family story as well as this intimate portrait of girlhood and growing up and family. But I just didn't connect fully. I think the prose is beautiful as it is with her, and there's lots of great dialogue, but I didn't connect. I didn't feel immersed in it. Some of it felt a bit too on the nose almost. And I know Woodson writes a lot of YA books, like that's her main thing for like kids and YA. And this is one of her like few, maybe two adult novels, whatever those categories mean. Let's put aside that for now. And there's something maybe in there about the style or the tone that isn't vibing with me, or that I'm not vibing with it. So while it was an enjoyable read, I didn't love it. Another Brooklyn I thought was beautiful and perfect, so I would highly recommend that one. This one just didn't do it for me, sadly. Sorry for all the Woodson fans out there. I also read some poetry. This book came out in February, Rachel Allen's God Complex, which is the follow-up to her book Kingdom Land. Rachel Allen was a great poet, and this book is like a long sequence, if you like. There are no individually titled poems, and it's a kind of breakup collection, right? It's about the end of a relationship, and it's also about environmental degradation and climate change in a very loose way. So it kind of ties those two things together. And again, this is like catnip for me, like emotional stuff, relationships, the planet. I didn't fully hook into it. There are some beautiful parts, some really beautiful individual poems or individual parts of the poem. So yeah, there are parts that I really love, some really individual strong lines and images, but as a whole, some of it felt, again, too direct, I think, is maybe one of my things with some of these books, is like it was saying too clearly what it was about. It was wearing itself very directly and openly, and sometimes I balk against that. I feel like you're telling me too much rather than allowing me to see it. And that's not the show don't tell thing, but rather I want you to take me to the place, but I don't want you to like put a sign up and say like, this is where we are now all the time. And it felt like it did that a bit. And I don't know, other people love this book that I know, trust their judgments, but there are parts of this that I felt that were too didactic almost, or like, this is how you should feel about this thing, or this is the exact feeling I'm describing. And I wanted a bit more room for ambiguity. So again, like a good poetry collection, some really beautiful stuff in it, but not fully for me, maybe. And then the other book that I was middling about was The Mountain Lion by Jean Stafford, which was first published in 1947. And I bought it because, well, this cover is fantastic, and I love these Faber new editions, and I'm writing an academic book on animals, and I've got a chapter on mountain lions, so this felt like a really useful precursor to the kind of recent stuff. I'm writing about Open Throat, if you know that book. I've talked about it on here before, somewhere. So I thought this would be useful, and it really is really well written. It's fantastic on like the minutiae of like daily life. It's about this brother and sister who are living in California, and they're sent to live on their uncle's ranch in Colorado. And it's very good on like childhood growing up, on all of the, like the dailiness of interfamilial dynamics, but also like the weather and the landscape and the heat. And also there's some stuff in there about like poetry and writing that the book seems to be gesturing towards itself, right? Like what writing can do. Jean Stafford is known, I think, probably more for her short stories, but this novel is like, it's a really good novel. But again, it felt like a bit of a slog at times. I felt like it could have been tautier or like a little bit shorter. I thought we were going to get to the mountain lion much quicker than we did. And we do get there. The novel takes on a really interesting turn. I'm not going to ruin the ending in any way, but the ending was perfect. The last 15, 20 pages, spot on, absolutely flawless, terrifying and brilliant, and really, really emotional. But up to that point, I didn't fully love it. Wasn't fully my thing. Again, really good portraits and an evocation of a place and a time. So if that's your thing, The Mountain Lion is for you. On to the three things that I did love this month. One, which I don't have a copy of because I've already given it to someone because I liked it so much, is Sheila Hetty's Alphabetical Diaries, which really blew me away. Again, I know some people who feel entirely opposite to that, but basically Hetty wrote a diary over the space of like a decade or so. And as a thought experiment, she copy and pasted all of the lines of that diary into an Excel spreadsheet, and she rearranged them by alphabet. So she basically then gathers all those together, and each chapter is a letter of the alphabet. And each of those chapters, then all of the sentences start with that letter, and they run in alphabetical order from there, right? So like the first sentence has like A, and then the second sentence would have like A, B, something, and so on and so on. So it's alphabetical, not just in the book, but within each chapter. So you're getting these sentences from across like 10 years, but kind of rearranged. And somehow it still works. You can still follow the book, you follow her logic, you follow her kind of change, but you're also being kind of like thrown around in time and place. You don't always know what's being referred to, but it was electrifying to read. I thought it was one of those great examples, and Hetty does this a lot, right? She did it with motherhood in particular, that a formal constraint or device or kind of experiment meets content perfectly, in that this is a book about what it means to change or not change, what it means to like track one's identity over time, what those repetitions are in life, like how you get stuck in certain cycles, right? There are certain men that appear in this book. There are like other friends that come back and forth, and you don't quite know if it's like then or now, how long ago this was. And that only adds to Hetty's point, I think, that like a diary as like a track of identity over time can be unraveled in certain ways when you think about like what is the distance between here and there. So I loved it. I flew through it. I want to go back and read it more slowly, actually, because there were so many lines that stood out to me. So I highly recommend that, especially if you're a Hetty fan. I think it's really fascinating on both a literary, formal level and an emotional gut punch level. And then I read Edouard Louis' Change, which on the front it says Change a Novel, and inside it says Change a Method, which in French, the French title is Changer une méthode. The translation, I'm not sure if that's like quite precise. Anyway, this is a novel, however, like with all of Louis' work, it kind of borders this auto-fictional stuff, right? So it kind of fits with The End of Eddie and History of Violence, kind of separate from the one about the mum and dad, right? Or the two books about his mum and dad, which are more non-fictional essay style. So this is kind of picks up after The End of Eddie, with his moving out of the small town, kind of like separating more from his family, moving to Paris and to university and all of these things. And it's really about what it means to change. And that's why I thought it was quite interesting to read that alongside the Sheila Hetty book. Both of them are concerned with like what it means to reimagine oneself or not. And like with all of Louis' books, like this is a very introspective, interrogatory book, like interrogating the self, interrogating the myths and narratives we tell about ourselves. It's really brutal in its depiction of his desire to separate from his family, and not just his family, but like what they represent, right? Poverty and a lack of learning in some kind of ways. Like it's really difficult to read in places, and he's aware of like what he's doing and how it feels, the kind of shame he feels, as well as the liberation he's feeling by moving away from them. It's written in various parts, like to certain people, to like his childhood friend, to his dad. It's very reflective, introspective. There's my cat's tail. And it's beautiful, right? He writes beautiful sentences. It's really thoughtful and actually quite moving by the end. So yeah, I'm like a big fan of his, so like I will read anything he writes. Freddie wants to be involved in this video, clearly. And it's longer than some of the other books, like there's quite a lot in here. I think it could have been a tiny bit slimmer, personally, but there's a lot going on, there's lots to unpack, there's lots to think through. I flew through it and was really hooked, and it really spoke to me in different ways about like class and gender and masculinity and expectations and all that kind of stuff, especially in relation to queerness and feeling like an outsider in multiple ways. right? An outsider because of your sexuality and the kind of gendered implications that go along with that, as well as in terms of your class position and the way you present and how he changes his name and the way he dresses and the way he performs his identity. And I mean perform in a very kind of like active way at first, but then as a kind of habitual thing. So yeah, there's tons in here to talk about. I think it's like I want to chew it over with someone once other friends have read it. So if you have read it, please write what you think below. That'll be really helpful for my brain, at least. So yeah, that's the kind of overview of the books I read in February. Again, I'll try and do March's one a little bit sooner than this, but you get the content eventually. So please, yeah, like this, let me know what you've been reading, what you're reading next, and I look forward to seeing you soon.